Throughout history, workplaces have witnessed shocking and disturbing deaths that go far beyond typical accidents. From bizarre factory mishaps to horrifying chemical disasters, these tragedies remind us how dangerous some jobs can be. Here's a look at some of the most unsettling and unforgettable workplace deaths of all time. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 is one of the most haunting and pivotal tragedies in American labor history, a moment that forced the nation to confront the brutal realities faced by industrial workers. On March 25, 1911, in the heart of Manhattan's Greenwich Village, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was bustling with about 500 workers, mostly young immigrant women, many of them just 16-year-old teenagers, some as young as 14. They were crammed into crowded workrooms, stitching away at shirtwaists, the fashionable blouses of the day, under grueling and exhausting conditions. Long hours, low pay, little ventilation, and barely any safety measures were the daily reality for these workers who were simply trying to earn enough to survive. That afternoon, disaster struck in the most devastating way. A small fire, likely caused by a discarded match or cigarette, ignited a pile of fabric scraps on the 8th floor. Highly flammable materials like wooden tables, paper patterns, and fabric piled high, the fire spread with terrifying speed. Workers panicked as thick black smoke filled the air. They tried to reach the exits, but they were met with an unimaginable horror. The doors were locked. The owners, Isaac Harris and Max Blanc, had kept the doors chained shut to prevent workers from sneaking out for breaks or stealing materials, a sadly common and dangerous practice in sweatshops at the time. As the flames roared and the heat became unbearable, many workers found themselves with no way out. The fire escapes were either too narrow, poorly constructed, or already collapsing under the weight of desperate workers trying to flee. Some tried to cram into the building's two small elevators, while others rushed to the stairwells only to be overtaken by smoke and fire. Then came the most heartbreaking and unforgettable scene. As crowds gathered helplessly in the streets below, dozens of young women appeared at the windows, realizing there was no escape. One by one, they began to jump, leaping from the 9th floor in a desperate attempt to avoid the flames. They fell to their deaths right before the eyes of horrified onlookers who could do nothing but watch. By the time the fire was extinguished, 146 workers were dead. Families were left devastated. The city was shaken to its core, and the public was outraged. Newspapers splashed the gruesome details across their front pages, reporting on the terrible conditions that had led to such an unimaginable loss of life. Citizens demanded justice, and Harris and Blanc were brought to trial. Yet, despite overwhelming evidence of their negligence and the clear disregard for worker safety, the factory owners were acquitted of manslaughter. They did eventually pay small compensation settlements to the victims' families, but it was little comfort after such a massive loss. Still, the impact of the Triangle Fire could not be ignored. It became a powerful rallying cry for labor reform. Massive protests and demonstrations swept through New York, led by groups like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, which had long been fighting for better working conditions. Politicians, activists, and even wealthy socialites joined the push for reform, working together to pass new laws on fire safety, building codes, and labor protections. Things like mandatory fire drills, unlocked exit doors, better fire escapes, and sprinkler systems became standard requirements. It was a hard-earned and deeply painful turning point, a moment in history that changed the way the nation thought about worker rights and workplace safety. Even today, more than a century later, the memory of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire lingers. It stands as a sobering reminder of what can happen when profit is valued over people, when workers' voices are ignored, and when basic safety measures are neglected. The reforms that followed have saved countless lives since then, but the tragedy itself remains a heartbreaking chapter in the story of American labor, one that should never be forgotten. On December 6, 1917, Halifax, Nova Scotia, was a busy and crucial port city during World War I. Ships carrying troops, supplies, and dangerous cargo arrived and departed constantly. Among these vessels was the French ship SS Mont Blanc, which was loaded with a massive and highly explosive cargo, including TNT, picric acid, benzol, and gun cotton. This made the ship a floating bomb in the harbor, a fact known only to a handful of people at the time. At the same moment, the Norwegian relief ship SS Imo was trying to leave the port, carrying supplies for Belgium. Due to a series of miscommunications, navigational errors, and some strict maritime rules, the two ships ended up on a collision course in the Narrows, the narrowest and most dangerous part of Halifax Harbor. The collision itself did not cause much damage initially, but it ruptured barrels of benzol, a highly flammable liquid, on the Mont Blanc's deck. This quickly ignited a fire on the ship's cargo hold. The crew aboard the Mont Blanc realized the extreme danger of their situation immediately and abandoned ship. They rowed away as fast as they could, leaving the burning ship drifting toward the shore. Unfortunately, the people in Halifax had no idea what the Mont Blanc was carrying. When the fire started, many curious residents, workers, and dock hands gathered near the waterfront or stood at their windows to watch the burning ship. They saw the thick black smoke and the flames licking higher and higher, but no one understood that this was a ticking time bomb heading straight toward the city. Then, at 9:04 a.m., about 20 minutes after the collision, the Mont Blanc exploded. The blast was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, releasing the energy equivalent of nearly 3,000 tons of TNT. The shockwave tore through the city, destroying buildings, shattering windows miles away, and hurling debris like deadly missiles into the air. The force was so powerful it created a tsunami in the harbor, washing away docks, boats, and anything else in its path along the waterfront. The human toll was devastating. Over 2,000 people lost their lives, and around 9,000 more were seriously injured. The blast caused horrific injuries. Burns, broken bones, and blindness were common. Many victims were people who had been standing at their windows or near the harbor watching the fire, completely unaware of the danger they were in. The explosion leveled entire neighborhoods, leaving thousands homeless just days before Christmas. As if the explosion and destruction weren't enough, the very next day, Halifax was hit by a severe blizzard. The sudden snowstorm buried the devastated city under a thick blanket of snow and ice, making rescue efforts even more challenging. Medical staff and volunteers worked around the clock to care for the injured, despite freezing temperatures and limited supplies. Emergency hospitals overflowed with patients, many of whom had suffered serious injuries. Families frantically searched the rubble for missing loved ones while battling the cold and snow. The blizzard added another layer of hardship to an already unimaginable tragedy. Despite the destruction, loss, and heartbreak, the people of Halifax showed remarkable resilience and determination. The community came together to support one another, and aid arrived quickly from across Canada and from Boston in the United States, which sent supplies, medical help, and funds to assist the recovery. Volunteers, workers, and soldiers joined forces to clear debris, rebuild homes, and restore essential services. The city's recovery was slow and difficult, but it demonstrated the strength and spirit of the people who refused to be defeated by disaster. On July 6, 1988, the Piper Alpha oil platform, located about 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen in the North Sea, was operating as one of the world's most productive offshore oil rigs. Designed to withstand harsh conditions, it was a massive structure extracting oil and gas beneath the ocean floor, a technological marvel and a source of livelihoods for hundreds of workers. But on that fateful summer day, everything changed in a devastating matter of minutes. The disaster began with routine maintenance on a gas compressor pump. Earlier, the pump had been taken offline for repairs, and a critical safety valve was removed for maintenance. Unfortunately, the system's communication broke down. Those restarting the pump were unaware that the safety valve had not been replaced. This error allowed highly flammable gas to leak unchecked into the platform. When the pump was turned back on, the leaking gas found an ignition source causing a massive explosion. This initial blast was only the beginning. The explosion damaged the rig's safety systems, including the firewalls and emergency shutdown procedures, and it ruptured gas lines that led to further blasts. Fires quickly spread across the platform, fueled by oil and gas, reaching temperatures that melted steel beams and destroyed escape routes. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Emergency systems failed to control the fire or assist evacuation effectively. Crew members faced terrifying conditions as smoke and flames engulfed the rig. Rescue efforts were hindered by the severity of the blaze and the remote location. Helicopters and lifeboats tried to save as many as they could, but in the end, 167 men lost their lives out of the 226 on board. It remains the deadliest offshore oil disaster in history. In the wake of the tragedy, a public inquiry was established, led by Lord Cullen. The Cullen inquiry revealed that the disaster was not simply an accident, but the result of a series of human errors, procedural failures, and inadequate safety culture. A critical failure in communication meant the maintenance team's warnings were not properly conveyed to operations personnel. Key safety equipment was missing or not functioning as intended. Emergency procedures were unclear, and personnel were insufficiently trained for such a catastrophic event. One of the most important findings was that safety had not been fully integrated into every level of the rig's operation. The inquiry highlighted how complex offshore environments require clear communication, rigorous maintenance practices, and comprehensive emergency preparedness. Piper Alpha showed that technical advances alone are not enough to prevent disaster. Safety depends on people, processes, and culture working flawlessly together. The aftermath of Piper Alpha led to significant reforms in offshore safety regulations around the world. The oil industry adopted stricter standards for equipment testing, maintenance, and emergency response. Safety management systems became mandatory, designed to identify risks proactively and ensure everyone knows their roles in a crisis. The tragedy served as a painful but necessary wake-up call that saved countless lives in the years since. Piper Alpha remains a solemn reminder of the dangers inherent in extracting natural resources from challenging environments. While the platform was destroyed and hundreds of lives lost, the lessons learned have transformed offshore safety. The disaster taught the industry that neglecting communication and safety procedures can have catastrophic consequences. On March 11, 2011, Japan faced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its history, a massive earthquake followed by a powerful tsunami that triggered a nuclear crisis with far-reaching consequences. This event, known as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, dramatically changed how the world viewed nuclear power and safety. It all began with the Great East Japan earthquake, a staggering magnitude 9.0 quake, which struck off the northeastern coast of Honshu, Japan's main island. The earthquake alone caused significant damage, but the real devastation came moments later when a towering tsunami, with waves reaching heights of up to 15 meters, around 50 feet, swept over the coastline. This deadly combination overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, located near the coast in Fukushima Prefecture. Fukushima Daiichi was a complex of 6 boiling water reactors designed to provide electricity safely and efficiently. Under normal conditions, these reactors rely on constant cooling systems to prevent overheating of the nuclear fuel rods, which generate heat through nuclear fission. However, when the tsunami struck, it knocked out the plant's power supply, including critical backup diesel generators that powered the cooling systems. Without electricity to operate pumps and fans, the reactors began to overheat. This loss of cooling caused the fuel rods in 3 reactors to melt partially, a process known as a meltdown. As temperatures soared, hydrogen gas built up inside the reactor buildings, eventually leading to explosions that damaged the structures and released radioactive materials into the environment. The contamination spread through air, water, and soil, raising serious concerns about health and environmental safety. The Japanese government quickly ordered evacuations in a roughly 20-kilometer radius around the plant, relocating over 100,000 people to safer areas. The evacuation was a massive logistical challenge, separating families and uprooting communities. Many residents still face long-term displacement, as large areas remain contaminated and unsafe for habitation. Globally, the disaster sparked intense debate over nuclear power's risks and benefits. While nuclear energy offers a low-carbon alternative to fossil fuels, Fukushima exposed vulnerabilities in reactor design and emergency preparedness. Countries around the world reassessed their nuclear programs. Some, like Germany, accelerated plans to phase out nuclear power, while others invested heavily in safety upgrades and alternative energy sources. The cleanup and decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi is an ongoing, complex process expected to take decades. It involves removing highly radioactive fuel, managing contaminated water, and dismantling damaged reactors, all under challenging conditions. Advanced technologies, including remote-controlled robots and specialized containment systems, are being used to reduce risks to workers and the environment. Despite the severity of the disaster, Fukushima also led to improvements in nuclear safety regulations globally. Japan, for example, established the Nuclear Regulation Authority, NRA, a stricter oversight body tasked with enforcing enhanced safety standards. New protocols for natural disaster preparedness, emergency response, and public communication have been implemented. Fukushima's legacy is a sobering reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting it with robust safety measures. It highlights the delicate balance between harnessing nuclear energy's benefits and managing its risks responsibly. The disaster also accelerated interest and investment in renewable energy technologies like solar and wind power, seen as safer and more sustainable options. In conclusion, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster was a pivotal moment in modern history. It was born from a natural catastrophe but magnified by technological failures. Its impacts, social, environmental, and political, continue to influence energy policy and safety practices worldwide. The disaster underscores the need for vigilance, innovation, and a commitment to protecting both people and the planet as we move forward in the complex world of energy production. On a chilly December night in 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, became the site of one of the deadliest industrial disasters the world has ever seen. Without warning, a silent, toxic cloud spread through the air, creeping into homes, choking the streets, and shattering thousands of lives in a matter of hours. This was no natural disaster. It was the result of human negligence, corporate cost-cutting, and ignored safety warnings at the Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant. At the heart of the disaster was methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly poisonous chemical that leaked from the plant after water accidentally entered one of the storage tanks, triggering a runaway chemical reaction that no one was prepared to stop. By the early hours of December 3rd, Bhopal was blanketed in toxic gas. Families awoke in panic, coughing, gasping for breath, their eyes burning as they stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the deadly air. Some never made it out of their homes. Streets filled with people running for their lives, yet there was nowhere to hide from the invisible killer. Thousands perished that night, and in the days, weeks, and years that followed, the death toll climbed to an estimated 15,000 to 20,000. Even worse, over 500,000 people were left injured or permanently disabled, facing lifelong health problems ranging from lung disease and eye damage to neurological disorders and birth defects among future generations. Entire families were shattered, and the city's landscape was forever changed. What makes the Bhopal gas tragedy so haunting is that it was entirely avoidable. Investigations revealed a chilling story of negligence, broken safety systems, ignored warnings, undertrained staff, and a corporate culture that prioritized cost savings over human lives. The plant had become a ticking time bomb, and on that tragic December night it exploded. Experts later found that the warning systems that might have alerted the community were either turned off or non-functional. The company had been warned before about potential hazards but repeatedly failed to take corrective action. It was not just an accident. It was the result of years of overlooked risks. In the aftermath, survivors fought not just to recover, but for justice. Union Carbide's then CEO, Warren Anderson, was charged but never brought to trial in India, shielded by international legal and political obstacles. The company settled out of court, but many survivors and activists saw the compensation as a fraction of what was owed, especially as the factory site remained contaminated for decades, continuing to poison the land and water around Bhopal. Entire communities still live with the environmental and health fallout, and cleanup efforts have been painfully slow, leaving toxic chemicals seeping into groundwater to this day. The Bhopal disaster became a global wake-up call, a grim reminder of what can happen when powerful corporations operate without sufficient oversight and accountability, especially in vulnerable communities. It raised urgent, still relevant points: how we hold multinational companies accountable, how we protect human lives from industrial risks, and how we make sure a tragedy like Bhopal never happens again. The memory of Bhopal stands not only as a symbol of loss, but as a call to action, urging the world to prioritize human safety over profit and to ensure that such a devastating failure is never repeated.